Her voice rang against the rim of the wine glass like a toast. Framed by candlelight, clinking glasses, and rehearsed smiles, she spoke one sentence, casually like a joke. And him? He simply stood up and walked away. No scene, no words, and no one noticed. Almost no one. Beyond that door, she lost everything, but she realized it far too late. The house he had spent 17 years building had turned into a weapon. And the celebration? It had been a farewell no one understood was happening. She thought she'd won, thought he was too soft. What she never grasped was this. Real revenge doesn't scream. It's quiet, cold, legally flawless, and absolutely devastating. He gave her the house, only on paper. He offered freedom, only in appearance. But inside, a storm had already begun to form. No shouting, no rage, just facts, just a signature, just a final period placed so precisely it could never be erased. Greetings, my dear friend. I am very happy that you are watching my video, and I will be even happier if you subscribe to my channel. This will make me even happier. Let's get started. Elias stepped up to the counter, sliding his ID and banking documents across the gleaming surface toward the teller. She took them silently, her hands moving with practiced efficiency across the keyboard, her face unreadable beneath the soft glow of the monitor. "Just a moment, Mr. Park," she said, her tone polite but distant. With a few more keystrokes, the final transaction was complete. The mortgage closed, the balance settled. The only sound was the quiet churn of the printer spitting out a fresh sheet of paper. She retrieved it, stamped it with precision, and extended it to him. "Your final statement," she said, her gaze meeting his only briefly as he accepted it. His fingertips traced the embossed bank seal with a strange reverence. It was done. The house, the debt, the weight of that entire chapter. Finished. With a faint nod, Elias turned and walked away, leaving behind the remnants of a life he no longer wished to carry. 17 years. 17 years of waking before dawn, staying late, working through holidays, sacrificing without end. That house had consumed nearly all he had to give, and now, in a single quiet transaction, it was no longer his. "Congratulations, Mr. Park," the teller offered, her voice wrapped in professional courtesy. "Your mortgage is officially paid off." He gave a muted nod, muttered a quiet thanks, and folded the document neatly into his coat's inner pocket. As he exited the building and stepped into the soft dusk of evening, the city greeted him with a chilled breeze, laced with the scent of distant rain and the hum of slow-moving traffic. It should have felt like a triumph, like a weight lifted. But instead, a quiet ache bloomed in his chest, whether from exhaustion or something more elusive he couldn't yet tell. But tonight wasn't about closure, not for him. Tonight was about something else, a gesture, a bridge, a final offering to a family he'd tried for years to truly become part of. The house would be theirs now, or at least that's what they'd believe. That evening, the dining room glowed softly, carefully prepared. Sabrina had arranged everything with care, candles flickering, familiar meals placed with quiet precision. The room radiated a warmth that felt almost manufactured, as though effort alone might mask the silence that had grown between them. Across from her, Elias sat with his hands wrapped around a half-full wine glass. She looked breathtaking in the flickering light, her auburn hair swept back, lipstick subtle and sure. She had always had that poised, luminous quality, but something in her had changed. The distance wasn't loud, but it was there. She occupied the space beside him, but not the space between them. Still, Elias chose not to dwell. The night had a purpose. Slowly, he reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope, placing it with care in front of her. Sabrina stopped mid-bite, her curiosity piqued as she set down her fork. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tinged with surprise. "Go ahead," Elias said, offering a small, measured smile. She broke the seal and unfolded the papers within. As her eyes scanned the page, realization settled over her features. "Elias," she said softly, her breath catching. "Is this—" "It's all yours now," he said gently. "The deed, the house. I transferred everything. No more debt. It's fully in your name." She stared at him, her face unreadable for a beat. Then, slowly, an unforced, genuine smile spread across her lips, one he hadn't seen in what felt like years. "This is unbelievable," she whispered, a laugh of disbelief escaping. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Elias murmured. "Just be happy." And for the first time in ages, he thought he glimpsed something real in her eyes, a flicker of the woman he once knew. Without hesitation, she grabbed her phone and began calling everyone, her parents, her siblings, close friends. Within moments, the house buzzed with warmth, with clinking glasses and joyful embraces. Her father gave Elias a hearty slap on the back. "You're a good man," he said sincerely. "Always knew you'd take care of our girl," added her brother, raising his drink. Elias smiled, returned their words with nods and polite thanks. But something inside him twisted. Their gratitude rang with quiet expectation, as though he'd simply done what he was supposed to, as though it had been owed. He drifted from the gathering, slipping into the dim hallway. From the shadows, he watched Sabrina wrapped in her mother's arms, their voices low, intimate. "This changes everything, Mom," Sabrina whispered, emotion brimming in her tone. "We're finally free." Her mother pulled back slightly, astonished. "He gave you the house? Just like that?" Sabrina gave a soft chuckle. "He's always been easy like that." Elias froze. The words lodged deep, easy like that. They echoed in his mind, each repetition cutting sharper than the last. His heartbeat quickened, but his face remained composed. They thought they'd won. What they didn't see, what they hadn't noticed in the fine print of the transfer, was one hidden clause. Buried in the legalese, a single paragraph in dense language, was a contingency. One stipulation. With a single signature, the deed could return to him. Everything they now celebrated could be undone. He had offered them the illusion of freedom. But the control? He had never let that go. And so, for now, he let them revel. Let them toast and cheer and breathe easy. Because they had no idea what he still held. A quiet unease curled in Elias Park's chest, like a storm forming silently beneath still waters. Deep inside, he knew this night was the start of something unraveling, a small fracture before the inevitable collapse. The house pulsed with celebration, rich with the scent of spiced wine and roasted meats. Light music drifted through waves of conversation, threading itself between laughter and the gentle clink of cutlery. The evening had been planned as a tribute, a final chapter in the story of a man who had spent 20 years chasing a dream, only to give it all away. But the joy in the room felt counterfeit. Stationed by the fireplace, Elias swirled his wine with absent fingers, watching the event unfold like a performance he no longer belonged to. Sabrina glided through the crowd with effortless charm, the perfect hostess, her smile bright and practiced. Her parents lounged at ease, already speaking as if the house belonged to them. Her siblings laughed, voices echoing with memories from a past that seemed to have conveniently edited him out. He should have felt proud. He should have been content. Instead, a suffocating pressure pressed against his ribs. He couldn't say when the feeling began. Maybe it started when Sabrina brushed past him earlier, offering a smile so carefully detached, it felt like he was just another face in a room he'd financed. Or maybe it was the way Noah and Bryce, her brothers, looked at him from across the room, not with gratitude, but with smug amusement, like they were in on some inside joke he hadn't been told. And then came the moment that shattered everything. Sabrina raised her fork, tapping it lightly against her wine glass. A clear, ringing note silenced the room. Conversations faded into expectancy. All eyes turned to her. Standing in the center, radiant in a deep red dress, she smiled with the same polished confidence that once stole Elias's breath. "Everyone, I'd like to make a toast," she announced, holding her glass aloft as anticipation settled over the room. The air shifted, charged with something unseen. Elias felt it settle into his bones, a low current buzzing under his skin. "To my amazing husband, Elias," she said warmly, her tone rich with admiration, "who worked tirelessly to give us this incredible home. We're finally free of burdens because of him." A murmur of agreement rose among the guests. Glasses lifted. Elias raised his too, nodding quietly. But then Sabrina added, her voice laced with mischief. "And now that we're financially unshackled, I think it's the perfect time to open the marriage. I could use a little thrill." The room erupted with laughter. Wine splashed. Someone whistled. Noah and Bryce exchanged knowing grins. Her mother gasped softly, but Elias stood motionless. Her words pierced him like glass, sharp, cold, and immediate. The room warped around him, sound bending and slowing. Across the crowd, Noah nudged Bryce, both grinning like accomplices, as if this moment had been planned, as if they'd rehearsed it. Sabrina's eyes locked with his, gauging his reaction, waiting, expecting him to laugh, to pretend it was all a joke. And for a fleeting second, he thought about doing just that. He thought about smiling, about nodding and chuckling like the harmless fool they imagined him to be. But something inside him clicked, not anger, not sorrow, something cleaner, simpler. Clarity. He set his glass down with deliberate calm. Around him, the laughter kept going, muffled and meaningless. One measured step at a time, he moved toward the edge of the room. Sabrina's expression faltered. "Elias, it was a joke," she called out, her voice painted with sugar and worry. But he was already leaving, already slipping past the voices, the music, the polished cutlery, the smug faces that had never truly seen him. He grabbed his coat, sliding it over his shoulders with quiet precision, and without a word, without so much as a glance behind him, he walked out the front door. The cold hit him like clarity. He welcomed it. Out on the street, he drew in a lungful of brisk night air, each breath slicing through the haze in his chest, cutting through the pain like frost. Behind him, the party continued uninterrupted. The music didn't falter. The laughter remained steady. No one noticed he was gone, except one. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out. No caller ID. He didn't need to guess. He knew who it was. With a faint, private smirk, one that never touched his eyes, he let it ring, then slipped the phone back into his coat and kept walking. Because what they didn't know, what none of them could see, was that their celebration was already borrowed time, and tomorrow, the reckoning would begin. The hotel room was dark, painted in the soft, cold light of the city glowing beyond the windows. Elias sat at the edge of the bed, watching the phone dance across the nightstand with each buzz. He didn't reach for it. He didn't need to check the screen. He already knew. Sabrina. Her family. Maybe a so-called friend trying to patch up what couldn't be undone. But their voices no longer mattered. Not tonight. Not ever again. He slowly reclined, folding his hands behind his head, eyes locking on the ceiling above. Every second of the evening played on repeat in his mind. Vivid, sharp, merciless. The laughter, the smug expressions, the careful orchestration Sabrina had arranged, certain Elias would be reduced to a footnote in his own story. They were so sure they'd already won, that he'd slink back, defeated and desperate. They had no idea what was quietly brewing beneath his calm exterior. Morning arrived more quickly than he expected. The last call had stopped just after 2 a.m., but Elias hadn't closed his eyes once. He didn't need to. At exactly 7, he reached for his phone, not to return any of the desperate messages, but to make the only call that mattered. "Julian, it's time." There was a short pause before Julian West, his lawyer, whose voice always carried a deliberate steadiness, responded evenly, "Are you absolutely sure?" "More than I've ever been." "Then let's begin." "Meet me at the office within the hour," Julian said. "We'll finish this." Elias ended the call with cool precision. No tension, no heat, just clarity. This wasn't about payback. It wasn't about anger. It was about restoring the truth. The law office was still cloaked in early quiet when Elias stepped through the door. Julian, his trusted advisor of nearly a decade, greeted him with a firm handshake and a face that gave nothing away. "You've made up your mind," Julian noted, gesturing toward the inner office. "I have," Elias replied without hesitation, stepping inside. He sat as Julian placed 2 thick, well-organized files on the desk, documents with the power to change lives before most people had finished their first coffee. Opening the top folder, Julian pointed to a page near the front. "Under the terms you agreed to during the property transfer, the revocation clause is ironclad. You have the legal right to reclaim the house with no resistance. Since you alone funded the mortgage, they have no standing to contest it." He nudged a pen toward him. "All that's left is your signature." Elias didn't flinch. He took the pen and signed. By the time the ink settled, the house was legally his once again. Sabrina had been living in a daydream, one now crumbling into a waking nightmare. Her chest tightened as reality crashed in. No, this wasn't real. Her fingers trembled as she snatched up her phone and dialed Elias in a panic. No answer. She called again, straight to voicemail. She turned to her brothers. Nothing. Panic rising, she called her parents. Her voice cracked when they picked up. "Mom, something's happened. Elias, he's taken everything." Silence met her words. Then her mother spoke, her voice frail and uncertain. "What do you mean, taken everything?" Sabrina gripped the phone tighter. "The house, the money, all of it. He planned this." Her mother gasped. "Sabrina, what did you do?" But Sabrina had no answer, because deep down, the truth had finally hit her. There was no going back. She'd triggered something that couldn't be undone. Sunlight spilled through the grand windows of the house, illuminating harsh realities. In her hands, the notice trembled, an eviction order she could barely read through her blurred vision. The legal jargon made little sense, but the message was devastatingly clear. They had 1 week to vacate. "This has to be some kind of mistake," she whispered, eyes wide with disbelief as she turned to her brothers. They stood like statues by the kitchen island, stunned. Noah, the oldest, grabbed the paper and scanned it, jaw tight. "No mistake," he said under his breath. "This was intentional." Their mother wandered the living room, robe cinched tightly, as if that could protect her from what was coming. And just then, Sabrina felt it. The full weight of every choice, every cruel smirk, every calculated jab she'd thrown at Elias like a weapon. "How could he do this to me?" she murmured, heart racing. She replayed the moment she'd last seen him, how his eyes had burned with restrained fury. He had been furious. That much was clear. But this? To take everything back, including the house they'd celebrated in just hours earlier? No, he wouldn't go that far. He wouldn't want to hurt her like this. "He still loves me," she whispered, half prayer, half delusion. Noah gave a bitter laugh. "Loved, past tense, and you handed him every reason to walk away." She turned on him. "Don't you dare." But the truth was louder than her protest. She had crossed a line. The celebration, the champagne, the barbed jokes, they'd felt harmless. She assumed he'd storm off, cool down, and return like always. But this time, Elias wasn't coming back, and she hadn't even waited to watch him walk out the door. She didn't hesitate. With hands shaking, Sabrina grabbed her coat and keys, bolting from the house and into her car without a second thought. The city outside morphed into a dizzying blur as she sped toward Elias's downtown office. Her mind raced with frantic justifications. Maybe this wasn't what it looked like. Maybe he'd lost control after one too many drinks. Maybe if she could just speak to him, everything could be salvaged. But no amount of mental bargaining could have prepared her for what awaited. Elias wasn't inside the building. He was already there, standing coolly beside his black sedan in a crisp navy suit, arms crossed, expression unreadable. A chill rolled over her. Gone was the man who once adored her, who once gave without hesitation. That Elias no longer existed. In his place stood someone steeled by resolve, someone unreachable. Her heels struck the concrete with sharp defiance as she marched toward him. "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" she demanded, shoving the eviction notice at his chest. Elias didn't budge. "I think it's pretty clear," he replied evenly. "You're kicking us out?" Her voice fractured, the disbelief thick in her throat. He tilted his head slightly, his stare fixed. "You mean my house?" Her gut twisted. "That's not fair. You gave it to us," she insisted. His response was swift, razor sharp. "No, I loaned it to you." Her breath hitched. "It was a joke, Elias," she said quickly, her voice trembling, desperation creeping in. "What I said last night. It wasn't serious." He looked at her, silent, unreadable. "I didn't laugh," he said softly. That was it. Sabrina blinked, disoriented by his bluntness. "Come on," she pleaded, forcing a hollow laugh. "You know me. You know I didn't mean it. You're taking this way too far." Elias's eyes darkened, his expression hardening. "Am I?" The words struck her like a blow. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come, because in her gut she knew. He wasn't overreacting. He was resolute. "This isn't who you are," she tried again, stepping closer. "You're not the type to just throw it all away." He exhaled slowly, like he'd rehearsed this conversation over and over. "You're right," he said. "I'm not walking away." Her heart lifted for a second. "Exactly. So we can—" "That's why I made sure you would," he said, voice like stone. The world dropped out from under her. He stepped back, opened the car door, and paused before getting in. "You've got 6 days," he said, voice steady. "Start packing." Sabrina stood frozen, the reality crashing down like a tidal wave. Elias got in, started the engine, and drove off without a backward glance. And that was when the panic truly settled in. Not rage, not disbelief. Just the stark, irreversible truth. It was over. It was real. The days that followed unraveled in a blur of chaos and denial. For Sabrina and her children, every hour felt like being slowly crushed under the weight of what was coming. They clung to hope, scoured documents, hunted for loopholes. But Elias had been meticulous. Every paper was in order, every account locked, every door closed. There was no reversing it. Then the ground shifted even more. In his office, high above the noise of the city, Elias sat silently, gazing out over the skyline. 17 years of tireless work, building a life, nurturing a marriage, believing in something solid, had crumbled in one careless moment. It had started as an ordinary dinner. Then she said it. "Maybe we should open the marriage," Sabrina had joked, laughing like it was nothing. His jaw had clenched. The room had gone silent. They assumed he'd shrug it off. They assumed wrong. He reached for the phone and dialed. A low voice answered. "It's time," Elias said with calm finality. "I want everything. No filters. Nothing left out." The voice on the other end responded without delay. "Understood." Elias hung up, his knuckles whitening as they gripped the chair. He'd been blind before, never again. The truth arrived swiftly. 3 days later, a thick envelope landed on his desk, full of answers he wasn't ready for, but needed. The pages were damning. Sabrina had been cheating for months, maybe longer. Worse, her family had known. Not just known, they had encouraged it, even celebrated it. They'd snickered behind his back, waiting for the fallout. She had played her part to perfection, and so had they. But Elias had rewritten the ending, and this time, he was the one holding the pen. The evening had never been casual, it was calculated. Her brother's cocky smirks weren't offhand expressions. They had already welcomed the other man into their inner circle. Elias was supposed to follow the usual script: keep quiet, swallow the insult, and keep footing the bill. But this time they'd rate him all wrong. With precise control, Elias snapped the folder shut, not a tremor in his hand. This wasn't just betrayal. It was an act of open hostility. Across town, Sabrina burst into her mother's parlor, the door thudding behind her as rage twisted her features. "He's ignoring every single call," she fumed, pacing in sharp circles. Her mother, frail and fine-boned, wrung her hands with visible anxiety. "Maybe. Try apologizing again, sweetheart." "I have apologized," Sabrina snapped. Her voice stretched thin. 12 times at least. He looks right through me, like I don't even exist." From his corner, Noah scoffed, unimpressed. "Because you messed it up," he said flatly. "You don't drop that kind of bomb in public. You were supposed to ease him into it." Sabrina turned on him, eyes blazing. "Oh, and now you're the expert?" she bit out. "You were the one who pitched the idea." Noah lifted both hands, deflecting blame. "We didn't think he'd actually walk out. The guy worshipped you. We figured he'd just take it like always." Sabrina slumped into the armchair, rubbing at her temples like she could erase the memory. "Well, he didn't. And now? Everything's unraveling." Their mother's voice wavered as her eyes darted between them. "Do you think he knows?" Noah frowned. "Knows what?" But they all understood. No one said it out loud, but the question hung in the room like smoke. Had Elias uncovered the affair? Did he see just how deep the deception ran? "No," Sabrina said quickly, shaking her head as if denial could erase reality. "He's just punishing me for the party. That's all." Noah didn't look convinced. "We need to figure out how much he's pieced together." A shiver rippled down Sabrina's spine, dread pressing against her ribs. For the first time since Elias walked out, the guilt gave way to something colder, something much sharper: fear. Across the street, Elias watched from the shadows, still and silent. His private investigator hadn't missed a step. Every meeting, every frantic word. He knew it all. And still, they believed this was about embarrassment, about pride. They had no idea how far he was ahead. Turning away from the window, Elias made for his car. One final move remained. A finishing blow, the kind that would seal the door forever behind her. He wasn't done yet. The estate that once rang with smug laughter and Sunday brunches now sat in eerie silence, hollowed out from the inside. The proud family home, once filled with clinking glasses and underhanded jabs, now echoed like a mausoleum. The eviction notice loomed, real and undeniable. The same family that had ridiculed Elias with snide comments and smirks was crumbling in real time. And Elias? He watched with clinical detachment, unmoved, icy, absolute. It started with whispers. In her sister's cramped kitchen, Sabrina's mother broke down, humiliated by the fall from luxury to asking for help. Her father, once puffed up with pride over Sabrina's perfect husband, now said nothing. His silence stabbed deeper than any words, but it was her brothers who cracked first. "This is your fault," Noah hissed, slamming his fist on the table hard enough to rattle the plates. Sabrina flinched. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," he snapped. "You humiliated him in front of a crowd. What outcome did you expect?" "It was a joke," she muttered bitterly. You all laughed. Yeah, because we thought he'd roll over like always, Noah shot back. We didn't expect him to torch the whole damn ship. Bryce, the youngest, sneered. Maybe if you hadn't flaunted the affair in his face, none of this would have happened. Sabrina's chest tightened. Don't put this all on me, she barked. None of you ever respected him. You went along with everything. Noah gave a hollow laugh. That may be. But you married him, Sabrina, not us. Her hands trembled. The adoration that once cushioned her, the loyalty that made her feel untouchable, gone. They looked at her now like she was the one who struck the match and watched the family burn. And maybe she had. Elias felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, nothing. In his glass and steel penthouse, he leaned back in his chair, whiskey in hand. His phone buzzed on the table beside him. Again and again. He didn't even glance at it. He already knew who was calling, and he couldn't care less. Sabrina, her mother, her brothers. One frantic call after another, relentless and insistent. He watched the phone as it lit up again and again and again. He ignored everyone. Didn't answer, didn't even listen. Just erased them. Their pleas were meaningless to him. He felt no remorse, no second thoughts. His course was set, and deep down he knew it. Sabrina was never the type to surrender. So when the knock echoed at his door that evening, sharp, urgent, he wasn't surprised. He waited. Let the silence stretch. Then, with deliberate calm, opened it. There she was, Sabrina, composed and radiant, dressed in a sleek black gown that clung to her like it was tailored from shadows. Not a hair out of place, lips gently parted, every detail curated to seduce. Elias leaned against the doorframe with a languid air, one brow raised in cold disbelief. "This is your play?" he asked, voice flat. She answered with a slow, sultry smile, stepping in close, letting her fingertips trail over his chest like a question. "Darling," she said sweetly, her voice a delicate hum. "We don't have to keep doing this." Elias's gaze sharpened, unreadable. "Doing what, exactly?" he said. Her smile faltered, barely. Then she tilted her head, feigning innocence, her fingers teasing the buttons on his shirt. "This whole grudge, this punishment routine," she whispered. "You made your point. You got your revenge. But we had something real once, didn't we?" She stepped nearer, her breath warming his skin. "You still want me, don't you?" she breathed. A long silence followed, dense with everything left unsaid. Then Elias laughed, quiet, icy, humorless. He reached out and took her wrist. His hold was firm, not forceful, not cruel, just enough to speak a truth he didn't need to say aloud. She was too late. He leaned in, close enough that their lips nearly brushed. Sabrina's breath hitched. For a second, she thought she'd undone the damage. Then he spoke. "You disgust me." The amusement in his eyes vanished, replaced by something colder. Indifference. A final verdict. She jerked slightly, trying to pull back. He didn't let go. "Not yet." "You honestly think," he said softly, "after everything you've done, I'd ever touch you again?" Her heart raced. "Elias, please." He released her, took a step back with the ease of someone who'd already made peace with the loss. "You're pathetic," he said, his voice low and level, and with that, he shut the door. Sabrina didn't move. The impact landed harder than she expected. She'd always known how to slip back into someone's heart, always found a way. But Elias was different now. He didn't ache for her, didn't rage either. There was nothing left inside him. And that emptiness, God, it was worse than hatred. Tears pushed at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away, turning before they fell. She wouldn't let this break her. Not entirely. Not yet. She wouldn't disappear quietly. She couldn't. Still, no matter how she tried to reframe it, the truth echoed within her like a verdict. "You've already lost." The hotel lobby pulsed with the soft murmur of conversation, the clink of glassware, the muted rumble of rolling luggage over marble tile. But for Sabrina Park, all of it blurred into white noise. She sat still at a glossy table, hands wrapped around a coffee she hadn't touched, waiting. Waiting for the man who used to be her husband, waiting for forgiveness. And then, he arrived. Elias Park. He moved through the space like he owned it, exuding calm control. His suit was immaculate, each step confident. Light caught the edge of his watch with every movement. Sabrina's chest tightened, not from longing, but from dread. This was her last hope. She stood as he neared, offering a carefully rehearsed smile. "Elias, thank you for coming." He didn't smile back, didn't sit, didn't soften. He looked at her with complete detachment. "Say whatever it is you brought me here to hear, Sabrina." Her throat tightened. "I made a mistake," she began, voice uneven. "I let people twist the truth. She reached out, trying to bridge the space. He stepped away, swift and firm, a wall between them. Her stomach dropped. "I know I hurt you," she went on, the desperation starting to show. "But what we had, it mattered. We built something, a life, a future. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." Elias stared at her, face blank, not angry, not sorrowful, just gone. And it shattered her. "I can make this right," she rushed, words spilling out. "Just, if you could unfreeze the accounts, if I could have the house back." Elias exhaled, slow and measured. Then, silently, he reached into his jacket, pulled out a sealed envelope, and placed it on the table. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. She hesitated before tearing into the envelope, fingers trembling with dread. The moment the papers slipped free, Sabrina's lungs seized. Photographs tumbled out, her and a man who wasn't Elias. A dimly lit restaurant, their hands intertwined across the table, a kiss captured mid-moment, the slow, steady disintegration of everything she thought she'd hidden. And beneath the photos, screenshots, text messages, Elias is too weak to fight back. "Once the deed's under my name, we're in the clear. Just have to keep pushing, wear him down." Sabrina's body went cold. Her mind raced. Who exposed her? A private investigator? A suspicious sibling? The answer didn't matter. Elias knew. He must have always known. And at the bottom of the stack lay one last blow, the property transfer fully executed. Her own handwriting stared back at her, a silent confession in ink. Proof of betrayal, laid out like a trap she'd baited herself. Below it, Elias's unmistakable script. "You wanted chaos. Now live in it." Her breath stuttered. "Elias," she whispered. But he was already walking away. She lurched forward, grabbing at his sleeve. "Please, wait," she gasped. He turned back. His face was unreadable. No anger, no affection, just the empty calm of someone who had finally let go. "You made your decision," he said quietly. "Now face it." Then Elias turned the knob, stepped through the door, and disappeared from her life. She stood there, motionless, every limb numb, as though the earth beneath her had betrayed her too. It was over. The money? Drained. The house? Gone. Every calculated lie and whispered manipulation reduced to rubble. She collapsed into the nearest chair, clutching the envelope like a life preserver in a storm of ruin. Around her, the hotel thrived, glasses clinking, conversations rising, couples laughing. But for Sabrina Park, the world had fallen deathly still. Outside, the tension was suffocating. A moving truck idled at the curb, its engine rumbling like a countdown to exile. Its metal ramp clanged under the footsteps of her family, each trip down carrying fragments of their dismantled lives. The sidewalk was littered with half-open boxes, belongings spilling out like secrets too long hidden. The house, Elias's pride, paid for over 17 hard-fought years, now stood empty, a hollowed shell, a headstone for a past they'd destroyed. And Sabrina? She was still there, paralyzed at the center of it all. Her mother paced the lawn, cursing under her breath. Her brothers barked accusations, tossing blame like live grenades. Her father sat hunched on the porch, eyes vacant, spirit defeated. And Sabrina could only watch, mute, as everything dissolved around her, falling through her hands like smoke. Across the street, Elias leaned against his car, hands buried deep in his coat pockets. His expression was unreadable, but his presence was heavy, anchored and silent. A real estate agent stood beside him, shuffling paperwork. "The buyer's deposit cleared. We'll finalize tomorrow. You're all set." "All right," Elias replied, voice even. His gaze never left the chaos behind him. It had never been about profit, not for him. He sold the house for just enough to cover the mortgage. Every remaining cent already given away to a shelter for women escaping abusive homes. A parting gift of mercy, one Sabrina would never understand. The agent handed him a pen. "Just your signature, Mr. Park." Elias turned to the last page and signed without pause. Just like that, the home they once built, mocked by her, fought for by him, belonged to strangers now. The agent packed the documents, nodded, and walked away. Elias lingered. He glanced back across the street. As if sensing him, Sabrina looked up. Their eyes met, once more, for the last time, and in that brief suspended instant, he saw it. Recognition, the crushing realization reflected in her gaze. She finally understood what she'd lost. The house, no longer hers. The money, gone without a trace. The family that once championed her betrayal, now casting her aside. Her mother clamped a hand on her arm, voice like venom. "This is your doing, Sabrina. Your selfishness. Your greed." Her father looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Her brothers walked off, not looking back, disappearing with the same speed they once stood behind her. Their loyalty dissolved like fog. And Sabrina? She was truly, completely alone. She stepped toward Elias, a single shaky stride. He didn't react, didn't speak, didn't even blink. There was nothing left to say. And the silence he left behind? It was louder than any goodbye. He drew in a long breath, turned his back on everything that had come before, and eased into the driver's seat. Behind him, Sabrina stood motionless, unable to move, as his car rolled forward, fading into the distance like a ghost she'd never be able to summon back. As Elias followed roads he'd known for years, an unexpected stillness settled over him. It wasn't sorrow, it wasn't longing, it was liberation. Nearly 2 decades of pouring his soul into a relationship where he was never truly seen. And now, that chapter was closed. He was no longer chained to a life built on pretense, no longer bound to a marriage that had decayed under the weight of betrayal. His car came to a gentle stop outside a sleek, understated apartment complex, its windows overlooking the pulse of the city below. This was his reset, simple, peaceful, undeniably his. Inside, he tossed his keys onto the counter and exhaled. A slow, quiet breath that seemed to carry years of weight. No raised voices, no unspoken resentment clinging to the walls. Just calm. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, stepped out onto the balcony, and took in the rhythm of the city, its lights blinking like silent invitations to a life reborn. He wasn't the man who'd once tolerated neglect. He wasn't the fool who confused infidelity with devotion. Elias had been broken, yes, but he had rebuilt himself with clarity and intent. And for the first time in ages, Elias Park smiled, genuinely. Crisp air filled his lungs as he wandered through the neighborhood he used to call home, hands buried deep in his coat pockets. It had been months since he'd last walked these streets, since he'd signed the divorce papers and stepped away from a life that nearly undid him. The neighborhood looked unchanged. The houses were the same. But he was not. He'd emerged from the rubble smarter, stronger, unchained. As he crossed the street, his gaze landed on a familiar cafe, the one where Sabrina had once spent endless afternoons nursing overpriced coffee and spinning tales of imagined woes. But today, she wasn't lounging. She was working. Elias did a subtle double take. The woman behind the counter, draped in a faded apron and moving with weary limbs, barely resembled the version of her etched in his memory. Her once flawless hair was tied into a careless bun, loose strands escaping like untamed thoughts. Her once manicured fingers, once decked in gold and diamonds, now bore chipped polish and raw, overworked skin. And her face, formerly so polished and proud, now wore the tired expression of someone who'd learned her lessons the hard way. Then their eyes met, and in that instant, she saw him. Elias didn't flinch. He stood still, watching as her expression cycled through a storm of feelings: shock, disbelief, guilt, and a faint, desperate flicker of hope. She tore off her apron and hurried from behind the counter, nearly stumbling in her rush to reach him. But Elias remained where he was, his face calm, unreadable, a serenity she could no longer touch. When she stopped in front of him, her hands hovered awkwardly, unsure if they had the right to reach for him anymore. "I made a mistake," she said softly, her voice rough with what might have been regret. "I trusted the wrong people. I destroyed everything. Her words fell apart. "I still think about you." Elias met her gaze, his silence more piercing than anything he could have spoken. Months ago, her words might have broken him. Back then, he might have faltered, might have felt that old ache for the woman he used to love. But now he smiled, not out of spite, not to hurt her, but with the quiet assurance of someone who had walked through devastation and found peace on the other side. "So did I, Sabrina." Her eyes lit up for a heartbeat, a fragile spark of something that almost looked like hope, until he added, "But I moved on." And just like that, the light in her eyes dimmed. Before she could speak, before she could plead, explain, or try to mend what had long since unraveled, Elias turned away. No dramatic farewell, no lingering look. He didn't need either. The past no longer held him captive. The future belonged solely to him. As he walked away, Sabrina stayed rooted in place, her eyes locked on the man she had once called hers. Her chest tightened with a chilling truth. This was the final page. Their stories had split for good. She'd gambled and lost. Elias wasn't driven by vengeance. He didn't crave the sight of her downfall. His victory was quiet. It was calm. It was choosing peace. And as he slid back into his car, the reflection in the rearview mirror revealed a man who was whole again, anchored, certain. He had won, not through fury, not through revenge, but by choosing to rise. And in the end, that was the most powerful justice of all, because sometimes the greatest revenge is choosing never to seek it. Our story comes to an end here. Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed this story, please check out other videos on this channel. See you soon, my dear friend.